It's that time of the week when former football and sports stars share their stories. It happens all right here, right now, on Thursday Night Tailgate. With your hosts, Chris-Mascaro and Bob-Lazzari. Guys, have some fun. Enjoy the guests. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Good evening, everybody. Chris-Mascaro and Bob-Lazzari here with you on Thursday Night Tailgate, your home for interviews and conversations with the greatest players in the history of the NFL and home of the NFL Alumni Association and the Gridiron Greats. TNT is brought to you today by the great folks over at Kyvan Foods, Coastal Orthopedics, the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, and the French Lick Resort. Tonight, Bob and I have 5 more great guests that we're looking forward to sharing with you. First up is going to be our good friend and former Kansas City Chiefs Pro Bowl kicker, Nick Lowery. At the bottom of the hour, former Patriots Pro Bowl running back Tony Collins. You know Tony joins us every single week here at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and now we're doing our 5-star picks of the week. Following Tony, one of our TNT Hall of Famers will be coming back home with us, and that is former Vikings and Chargers Pro Bowl guard Ed White. He'll be here. He'll join us a little bit later on in this hour. We'll kick off hour number 2 with Pro Football Hall of Fame defensive tackle Curley Culp, and Curley is in just a mountain or boatload of Hall of Fames, including the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So we'll talk to Curley about all the great things that he did through the course of his college career at Arizona State and then out on the playing field as well. And then we're going to round out this show with former Pittsburgh Steelers guard Craig Wolfley. So we're going to have a whole lot of fun tonight, folks. So sit back, relax, and let us take your mind off everything else going on in your life for the next couple of hours. But we'll get things started by bringing in my co-host, Mr. Bob-Lazzari. Bob, do you have a roll of Tums sitting next to you tonight, my friend, as our Red Sox kick off the postseason run against the Indians? Are you ready to pop a few just in case things go haywire?
Oh, man, we did talk about that the other night, right? You know,
yep.
It's the pleasure of doing this show, Chris. I don't need any for this show or any football game I watch. But, yeah, the Tums are ready, and we'll be following it online, and then we'll probably be able to see a little bit at the end. So, yeah, I'm ready, Chris. October baseball, and there's a nip in the air here in New England.
Ah, there you go. It's a great time of year to be a sports fan. So, Bob, let's start things off by going through what we learned from Week 4 around the NFL. There are several teams now, Bob, sitting at 1-3, and a few of them, kind of a big surprise, I think, to both you and I. We never would have guessed we'd be seeing the Cardinals, Panthers, and maybe even the Jets and the Colts at 1-3 right now. And Bob, you know, as you look out, you try to figure out, you know, can any of these teams really turn it around and get themselves back into playoff contention? Well, only 14% of teams that have started out 1-3 since 1990 have made the playoffs, and you know there are 13 actually right now all across the NFL that are 1-3. So that means 1 or 2 of them, Bob, are, you know, still have a really good shot of making the playoffs. So, you know, we both thought highly of the Cardinals at the start of the season. You know, the Panthers obviously coming off a Super Bowl appearance. So, Bob, do you think any of these 1-3 teams are going to turn it around to make it into the postseason?
Boy, you made a good point, Chris. 14%, that's a low number. You know, I was looking around myself for the odds of it happening. 14% is very low. If I were to say who could do it, but there's also an asterisk to that too. I would think that the Cardinals would still have a shot, Chris. But I'm concerned with the health of you know, the quarterback Carson Palmer. That's a
right.
major thing, and the reason why I think guys like you and myself were high on them was because they had a few guys that they're getting toward the end of their career. Let's face it, Fitzgerald, Palmer, and guys like that, and together with a good defense. And I still think their defense is pretty good, Chris. They've given up 80 points in 4 games, and I think they could even do better. But without that, the uncertainty at quarterback, you know, that is a big deal to me. So, and the other team, of course, people would think that could turn around because of last year is Carolina. Then again, this is a team that's almost given up 30 points a game, Chris. And that was the team I was asked on another show, you know, what's a team that's highly touted that you think might not be good? And for the reason of the loss of some defenders, including Josh Norman. That was my team, and including the high that they were on last year, and try to duplicate that all. That was my pick for a team that might not be as good as people thought. So, man, I mean, two very talented teams that, and the 14% number, Chris, Carolina and Arizona would be my first guys I'd look at. The rest of them, I don't think there's a 1-3 team. Look at the rest of them, Chris. Do any of them stand out that they could really do, like your Indies or San Diego's? I don't think so. So, if any, it might be a team like Arizona, but that all depends on the quarterback.
Yeah, and, I'm with you, Bob. Of the teams, and again, there's a bunch of them around there right now, which is, really surprising when you think about the parity in the league that you've got a bunch of 1-3 teams. But yeah, if I'm going with one, then I'm going to stick with the Arizona Cardinals. To your point, Bob, their defense is still pretty good. Defense, I continue to say defense wins championships. So, they're ranked 9th right now. They're 7th in offense. So, they've scored, 12 more points than they have allowed at this point, which is kind of funny. You think a team is 1-3 and they've scored more points than they've allowed. So, they're the team that I think, has the opportunity to turn up. But to your point, Bob, you got to sort of wonder now, right? Carson Palmer with, in the concussion protocol, which, it doesn't look like he's going to play this weekend against the 49ers. So Drew Stanton is going to get the call there. He started 8 games for Arizona back in 2014. They were 5-3 in those games, so pretty respectable. So, they can be successful, if they need him to play, a game or two. But, Bob, they really got to get a win this weekend pretty badly. You talk about statistics, right? Only 9 teams in the history of the league have made the playoffs when they started out 1-4. So if they're going to have a chance, it's going to have to be with a win this weekend. So it's a big game for them. And Drew Stanton is going to be their guy. So we'll see come this time next week if we're talking about a team that I thought could make a very deep run in the playoffs, get to the the NFC Championship game, potentially get into the Super Bowl as well. I know they were your Super Bowl pick. We could be looking 5 weeks in at a team that we thought was going to be very good. Essentially being out of it.
Right, and that's the NFL today, Chris. It's unpredictable. When we get to our picks, we'll talk more about that. But right. It's nobody. There's no experts in this sport. Trust me.
And Bob, our good friend Tony Collins, has to get up every morning this week and post on his Facebook page, "I love the Buffalo Bills," thanks to their 16-0, the Bills 16-0 win over the Patriots last Sunday. So Tony's got to face a little embarrassment for some bets that he made. So I guess the question really on the flip side, when you're thinking about the Buffalo Bills, Bob, a team that has fired their offensive coordinator right a couple of weeks in. So here we are now. They're 2-2. Did that win save Rex Ryan's job?
I was under the impression, Chris, that they had to at least look really good, and the win. I think it really did. I mean, if we were looking at them this week with another loss and another uphill battle to have a shot at the playoffs, you'd say, my goodness, this team 1-3 again, and where are we going? But when you look at it, Chris, after 4 games, the team's given up 68 points. Not bad, 17 a game. He is considered a defensive guru. Maybe not like his father, but a defensive-minded coach, shall we say. Giving up 17 points a game isn't good, and that's after playing a New England team. Now, we know it's not the Brady New England team, but nobody saw that coming, Chris. My goodness. And Tony is one of the more positive people we've ever met, and this is going to put his positivity to the test, how he acts tonight. So we'll see how he's doing when we talk to him. But I do think it saved his job. 1-3. And looking at a long season as opposed to 2-2 coming off a victory over a probable Super Bowl team, that is a major difference, and the momentum definitely shifted Ryan's way.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go over to the NFC, and you look at the Cowboys. They're off to a 3-1 start. Dak Prescott, pretty impressive for a rookie quarterback, 13th rated quarterback in the league right now. Has yet to throw an interception, completing 68% of his passes. And then, fellow rookie on the Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott, now has got things rolling for the Cowboys. He's leading the league in rushing. He's the only running back right now that's averaging more than 100 yards rushing per game. He's averaging 103. So, Bob, you got to imagine there's some pretty big chemistry working right now for the Dallas Cowboys. So if you project ahead a few weeks, right, if Tony Romo comes back, based on what we've seen so far, if Dak continues to play at the current level that he's playing, would you sit him in favor of bringing Tony Romo back?
Wow, and that I was thinking about this question all day, Chris, and trying to put myself in Jason Garrett's position. It's not a good position to be in. Here's a team. Now, on paper, you would say, look, the team is averaging 25 points a game, has some very good talent on the team. Your guys like Elliott, as you mentioned, and the receivers and the tight end. I mean, they have some talent there, and 25 points a game. You would think even with Tony Romo they can do that, but you hit it right on the head when you said chemistry. Would you want to Romo to come back and to disrupt what's going on with the Prescott? Looks like he's just getting comfortable with some of these guys. He's not making mistakes, Chris. If there's any rap on Romo over the years, is him making that big mistake at the wrong time. But then again, if you look at Romo's his career stats, they're impressive, and he has been pretty much close to being the face of that franchise for a while now. So my goodness, that is a very tough call. My gut feeling last week was that Romo comes back and claims his job, and then you, as Jason Garrett, you'd say to yourself, I'm in very good shape with a very good backup quarterback. We're very strong at the position. As we know, Chris, Romo, I think he's got the reputation now of being susceptible to injuries. So it's a good problem to have in a way, but that is a tough call on Garrett's part. Right now, I'd say depending on how Romo looks in practice and how he feels, I'd say it's still his job to lose.
Bob, when I think about situations like this, I always sort of hearken back to the 72 Dolphins. Now, again, the Cowboys are 3-1. We're only 4 games in, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form comparing the Cowboys to the 72 Dolphins. But the quarterback situation is what, I hearken back to. I always shook my head and wondered, if people don't remember, right? Bob Griese played, the first 3+ games for the Dolphins in 72 before, breaking an ankle and then, missing the whole rest of the run until the Super Bowl. Earl Morrall led them through the rest of that undefeated season, through the playoffs and to the Super Bowl, and then, Shula went back to Griese to play the Super Bowl. Right, and I always, often, think about, why would you do that? What an injustice it sort of felt like to me to Earl Morrall. I lead you all this way through the rest of this undefeated season, and I don't get to play in the Super Bowl. That's always something I've wanted to ask Don Shula to kind of walk me through the thought process there. But I feel sort of similarly here, right? If Romo comes back, and I don't know what week they might be thinking he'll be healthy enough to come back, but let's just call it week 10 for round numbers, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden you're 9-1, 8-2 under Dak Prescott, and things are rolling, and Ezekiel Elliott's continue his great his great rookie season, and everything is going along as it's going. And then you're going to turn it back over to Tony Romo? Really? I don't know, Bob. You're right. To me, that's a very difficult call to make at that point.
You'd probably say to yourself, let's let Prescott do it until he goes into a semi-slump, and then at least as a PR move, the Dallas would look okay bringing Romo back. But it's just a very, very tough decision. At this point, I would not know. I wouldn't feel comfortable either way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Bob. This is a very sticky situation. I think the Cowboys have been, trying to get over the hump, right? Tony Romo with the playoff wins and that sort of thing. The fans were already sort of in Dak Prescott's, they were thinking very highly of Prescott based on how successful he was in the preseason, right? 5 touchdown passes, in the preseason. I think they were already calling for him sort of to get in there, and now you potentially would mess that up here in a few weeks. Boy, if you're Jason Garrett, you better be right. if you go back to Romo. Now, Jerry Jones may be pulling the puppet strings and telling him you're putting Tony Romo back in there. And, who knows what goes on behind the scenes. But, boy, that's a tough position for Jason Garrett to be in.
No-win situation. It really is. It really is.
Yep. All right, everyone, like we do here every single week on Thursday Night Tailgate, we want to send out a big thank you to our military personnel listening in around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network. We can't say thank you enough for doing what you do to protect all of us in our way of life. For everyone else listening in, on the station or the app of your choice, we certainly appreciate you very much, and we hope you'll join us in thanking our brave men and women serving in our military. If you happen to see, a member of any branch of our military, our servicemen and women out in your daily life, whether it's at the grocery store, in the airport, in a restaurant, or just out and about, wherever you might be, please stop for a moment and tell them thank you. They are our true heroes. We also want to thank our veterans for your service and the sacrifice that you and your families have made for us over the years. Big thank you as well to Sean Cruz and all the wonderful folks over at the Armed Forces Radio Network. We are always so honored that Thursday Night Tailgate is a part of your network. You can find our show by going to armedforcesradionetwork.org. And veterans, please continue to check out globalvoiceforveterans.org for news and articles that are both interesting and beneficial to you. Again, globalvoiceforveterans.org. TNT is brought to you by the great folks over at Kyvan Foods, owned and operated by our good friend and former Bengals and Falcons tight end and Thursday Night Tailgate Hall of Famer Reggie Kelly. If you want to be king of the grill, it is a must that you use Kyvan Sweet Barbecue Sauce, ranked number 15 in the world by Barbecue Superstars. Barbecue Superstars. This barbecue sauce, it's a must for the big game, for your tailgating needs. It is available at select Walmarts and Kroger's throughout the eastern half of the country. For locations, online orders, and recipes, check out their website at Kyvan82.com. And Kyvan is spelled K-Y-V-A-N. And if your local Walmart doesn't carry the Kyvan Sweet Barbecue Sauce, well, request it. I'm sure they'll be happy to add it to their shelves for you. TNT is also sponsored by Dr. Peter Candelora and the great folks over at Coastal Orthopedics. Folks, if you're dealing with joint pain, whether it's, in your knees, your hips, your feet, wherever it might be, please don't just live with it. Do what the Gridiron Greats do to get relief, and that is contact Coastal Orthopedics. They can get you back to enjoying life. For more information, check them out online at bone-dr.com. Baseball season, you heard Bob and I talking about it, right? We're in the postseason now, and if you love the game, you're going to love the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory. They were recently welcomed into the TripAdvisor Certificate of Excellence Hall of Fame. The museum is a very cool place, folks, for everybody in the family, because you get to walk their live production line and see the bats being manufactured right there in front of you. A couple of weeks ago, you heard from Executive Director Ann Jewell. She was here with us on the show talking about their Ripley's Believe It or Not exhibit, which has some bizarre baseball treasures in there for you to see. Don't miss the Balt Bat. You hear me talking about it all the time here on TNT. So many of the great, game's greatest legends like Hank Aaron, Ted Williams, my hero growing up, Willie Stargell, their game-used bats are right there in the bat vault. You get to pick those up and hold them, check those out. To find out more information about the museum and to book your visit, go to sluggermuseum.com. And, folks, please also check out our friends at the French Lick Resort. You want to talk about a fantastic place to stay and play golf or just simply relax and enjoy yourself. What a fantastic setting they have up there. They got 2 championship golf courses designed by Pete Dye and Donald Ross. The Pete Dye course hosted last year's Senior PGA Championship. They just hosted the LPGA Legends Championship about a month ago. The Donald Ross designed course was the site of Walter Hagen's PGA Championship victory back in 1924. Got a great spa. And, oh, by the way, my friends, a casino right there on the property as well. To find out more information and to book your stay, go to FrenchLick.com. And finally, don't forget our friends at the Gridiron Greats organization. Please help us, support a wonderful cause that's taking care of the guys who literally left so much of themselves out on the playing field. Folks, these are the guys who played back, when they still had to get off-season jobs to support themselves and their families. It's organizations like this one that was started by Mike Ditka. It's the Gridiron Greats who are there trying to help the guys we all grew up watching and reading about. Please go to gridirongreats.org to see how you can get involved. All right, now back with us on the French Lick Resort guest line is our good friend and former Chiefs and Pro Bowl kicker Nick Lowery. Let me remind you a little bit about Nick's background. He was born in Munich, Germany, grew up in Washington, D.C., and attended Dartmouth College. He got into both Princeton and Dartmouth, oh, by the way, but chose Dartmouth. He also has a master's from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. He played in the NFL from 1978 to 1996 for the Patriots, Chiefs, and Jets. But it certainly wasn't an easy road for Nick. He was cut an amazing 11 times for a guy who should now be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler and named All-Pro 7 times. He still ranks 10th all-time in field goals made and 13th in field goal attempts for the Kansas City Chiefs. He is their all-time points leader. Nick received the prestigious Byron Whizzer White Award from the NFL Players Association back in 1993 for the great work that he does out in the community. He was elected to the Chiefs Hall of Fame in 2009. He established the Nick Lowery Youth Foundation dedicated to helping disadvantaged youth, especially Native Americans. And like we've said every time that Nick has joined us on the show, it just doesn't make sense to us. If Jan Stenerud is in the Hall of Fame, there is no way you can justify not having Nick Lowery in, a guy who scored 235 more points and made 80% of his field goals to Stenerud's 64%. Hey, Nick, Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show, my friend.
Hi, Nick.
I think you guys should do the interview without me. You're doing a great job.
It's so much more fun when you're a part of the show, though, Nick.
Yeah.
So, Nick, let's start off as you and I were communicating during the Chiefs-Steelers game Sunday night. Tough go round for your boys. Are you taking that like I did the week before when my Steelers got roughed up by the Eagles? You look at it as, you know what, one tough loss, we'll move on, they'll rebound. Or are you more concerned than that?
Well, I every time you see a team that has maybe a little bit too easy a win, 6 interceptions, and the last 3 or 4 by Fitzpatrick were just dumb, and forced. And there's a Harvard guy who I think he's been hit a few times, and he just tends to get in that sort of myopic vision. So the Chiefs had a little too easy time, and then, of course, Pittsburgh got embarrassed. So guess what? They come home. It's a raining game. Chiefs make 2, very poor turnovers early in the game, instant touchdowns, and suddenly – they're fighting back up. And the thing about the Chiefs that really hasn't been proven to me otherwise is, with the exception of Macklin and occasionally Kelsey, they just don't know how to throw downfield. They don't have a threat downfield. So when they're in trouble and when they're behind, it makes it, even with a very good quarterback, I don't know if he's a great quarterback. I think he's a very good quarterback, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, is a very good athlete. Bottom line, though, is that Alex Smith and that offense is not an intimidating offense, and when they're behind by 2 touchdowns in a raining game, and the defense, of course, the secondary plays pretty terribly for us as well. It was a recipe for disaster. So let's hope that it's a bye week and they're going to turn around. And one great thing about this team, it's a slow starter, but Andy Reid seems to, if they do what they did last year, reel off a string of wins. So let's hope so.
So to your point, it's a bye week. The next game for the Chiefs is they go to Oakland to play the Raiders, and the Raiders are starting to look like a bit of a revitalized franchise. Right before, of course, now right before they pack up and move to Las Vegas, but they sit 3-1 right now. So curious, get your thoughts on the Raider game in a couple weeks. But beyond that, Nick, the Raider fans are going to be left sort of alone and lonely, if you will, for a second time as the Raiders pack up and move yet again. Thoughts on the Raiders?
Well, I don't want to comment on what isn't definitely there, but let's hope it's a coming out game for Jamal Charles after all this time. It's perfect for him to have gotten just a couple runs, and then he gets the bye week, and he gets into the flow. And Ware is a very good running back. He's really only fumbled 2 times, not 3 times, but it's still a little worrisome. But the Raiders have themselves their first real quarterback in a long time, probably since Rich Gannon, and a real leader, a guy that's led them. They've got Cooper, to me, is just a superb, just a polished, incredibly mature, varied, multi-talented receiver. They've got the threats that the Chiefs don't have at receiver, to me. So it's going to be a tough game. I think one thing that's predictable about the Chiefs is just when you think they're don't have a chance, they surprise you. So I'm hoping that will continue.
Bob, questions for Nick?
Hey, Nick, it's great to speak with you again, and I'll be watching the Yale-Dartmouth game from the Yale Bowl press box this Saturday.
Really?
I'll be thinking of you. Yeah, I'll be there, and Your Dartmouth looks pretty good, and Yale is having an off year so far, Nick. So should be a good battle. But look forward always to watching Ivy League teams like that. But getting back,
can I brag about
go ahead.
Dartmouth for a second? Well, first of all, we beat Yale 3-0 my senior year after some frustrating games against Yale during my career. It was nice to finish with a win. And then the Dartmouth head coach, Buddy Stevens, who was a great coach and Ivy League champion in the 90s, he goes away to Tulane, then he goes to Stanford, comes back, and Dartmouth has led the way with literally something called the Dartmouth Way. It was featured on Stephen Colbert, this robotic dummy, and this whole commitment to no tackling of teammates at all, ever during your career. They've reduced injuries 80%. They've reduced concussions 60%. They tied for the Ivy League title last year. They convinced after 5 years of incredibly high-level performance and improvement every single year, top 10 in the entire NCAA in all 4 major defensive categories. The entire Ivy League voted to adopt the Dartmouth Way, and it's kind of cool that the cradle of football, literally the Ivy League, they really, Teddy Roosevelt, when he had a lot of deaths, literally 15, 20 deaths in the early 1900s, said, you better come up with some rules or else I'm going to ban football. Now's the time to be stewards of the best game in America, and the Dartmouth Way is going to lead the way, and whether it takes 20 years or 5 years, I'm hoping, and I'm working with Terry O'Neill from NBC and Buddy Stevens to get this thing out there, to get maybe every NFL player to maybe buy 1 or 2 of these probably about $5,000 blocking dummies that move across the field very fast for every high school team that a player in the NFL played for, and start getting it out there pervasively so that we can literally cut concussions in less than half and save this game and let it continue to prosper. So my hat's off not only to Dartmouth for being a very good football program, despite the fact they only have 500 males in each class versus 750 in most of the other schools in each class at the other Ivy League schools, but also their leadership off the field and with this really incredibly bright and effective way to reduce concussions.
That's a great point, and we hope it gets out there, Nick. And I was looking at your pro career, and I'm always interested in training methods and things like this. And I know your longest field goal, at least at the pro level, was 58 yards. I'm sure you made longer ones in practice. And as time goes on, Nick, the training methods get more intense and hopefully better and everything. Are the kickers doing something now, Nick, that you wish you had access to, which you think probably could have made you probably kick more than a 58-yard field goal?
Hey, listen. The footballs have steroids. I mean, 6 years ago, a guy named Tony Romo fumbled the K-balls, which are these virgin-like footballs. And the best analogy I've come up with is the baseball mitts, the new leather. Anybody that's ever had a baseball mitt that's new, they can't really use it right away. They got to put linseed oil in it. They got to rub it down. They got to get it pliant. And when Tony Romo fumbled that 21-yard game-winning potential field goal against Seattle in the playoffs 5, 6, 7 years ago, when quarterbacks like poor little Tom Brady and his need to have the perfect football, who, by the way, is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, but I'm just having fun with it. The quarterbacks can have their footballs and pick them out, as Peyton Manning said in his goodbye press conference, pick out the perfect football, but kickers can never do that. Well, since then, look at the average punt, the average kickoff, and the average net punt. It's all up 4 or 5 yards. Jan Stenerud, sitting next to me last year in the owner's booth at the Arrowhead Stadium, goes, Nick, you need to talk to the NFL guys tell people about this. It's not, all these, because the ball literally is so much easier to kick when it's been worn in. They have a special guy that does that, and that's probably what led to that Deflategate, because the guy was supposed to take care of that new generation of footballs that are much more worn in. The simple math of it, if they did sports science on ESPN, and we probably should do one on this, what they'll show is the average time that a foot is connected to a football is 0.004 of a second, which is nothing. But when you get a new football that's worn in, and it's no longer just a really hard football, that's suddenly 0.005 of a second. 1,000th of a second may not seem like much. That's 25% more power and control. So you're seeing these guys that, hey, they're better than they've ever been. Absolutely. They ain't that much better. And suddenly they're all kicking 50-yard field goals like they're 40-yard field goals. There's a reason for that. And I'm amazed that the media don't cover this. Well, it's the same double standard of the quarterbacks having, one standard for the quarterbacks and the kickers, well, they're just kickers and they're just not really football players. The truth is, you know what? We had a guy named Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa that, they weren't very happy when they found out that they were taking steroids and, the unfair advantage they got. Well, that's fine. If this is within the rules, that's great. But at least talk about it. At least talk about the fact that the standards that kickers like Jan Stennard and myself had to abide by, and punters like Brian Barker and Sean Landeta and Ray Guy, we're different. The football that you had to kick in 1960 and in 1990 and even in 2000, when it's 15 below zero and late in the season in a playoff game, was very significantly harder to kick. And so those records are much more significant. Does not mean that the kickers aren't better today. Overall, the kickers are absolutely, they're better, but they ain't that much better. But I don't have an opinion about that.
Of course you don't. Don't be silly.
No.
So that's the big training thing. I mean, I think the other thing is we used to do really heavy squats, and I used to do lunges with 240 pounds, but they have a lot of machines now and a lot of things that are cross-training and build not only strength, but protect range of motion and improve balance. And if you're a kicker that's built like an offensive lineman, you're going to have trouble kicking the long way. You're going to have trouble having that dexterity and that balance. So those are other things that you've seen not only in kickers, but all the positions. The athletes are more athletic. You see defensive linemen that run like gazelles now because they train as real athletes. They train for skill, not just for raw strength.
Nick, I don't want to get too far away from the point you were making a moment ago about about Dartmouth and the robotic tackling dummies that use. And I saw the Steelers actually brought them into to training camp to give a look-see to, this past summer. But I was curious. I mean, have you heard about? Is it expanding? Are more teams starting to consider using that? Are you hearing anything?
Mike Tomlin has not let them go. He was supposed to give them back to Buddy and to give to Jacksonville. He said, no, we're keeping them. So, I believe the Steelers still have them. So, and you know what? The Steelers are, I think most people think, one of the organizations that had great leadership, They had leadership in the ownership. I think Tomlin's an excellent coach. They have hard-working commitment from the organization. And, that's a team that knows whatever we need to help us win, the better. And it's beginning to take off. So, I'm pretty confident that by the end of next year, virtually every NFL team will have them. And I'm hoping that 30% or more of major college teams will have them, maybe 20% of high schools. And then in about 5 years, I'm hoping, the great majority have this combined with the tackling drills. Seattle adopted a lot of tackling drills that were really perfected through rugby, and it's a way to tackle somebody with your full body and protect your head, and you can do that in a way in practice where you don't get those little hits that the University of North Carolina study 10 years ago showed were just, in the end, cumulatively just as important and significant to long-term potential CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, as even the big concussions were. So, we're headed in the right direction, and our goal and our passion is to protect the game and get this way of practicing in place in 5 or 6 years, not 20.
Mm-hmm. And Nick, along the same lines, I mean, you've been very outspoken over the years that we've had the privilege of having you on the show, talking about health concerns for your peers and the alumni players. The other great thing that you're doing out in the community, through your foundation, is working with kids. Update us on some of the work that you're doing there through the Nick Lowery Foundation.
Well, thank you for asking. I love the work I'm doing. I just did an interview on a movie called Think on Tuesday about the famous seminal book Think and Grow Rich, which really is rich in spirit, written by Napoleon Hill back in 1937. And Warren Moon was in there after me, and Jim Leyritz from the Yankees. And, the message is that real happiness is in finding a purpose that uses your unique, everybody listen, your unique God-given abilities, the way you take in the world, the way you express it, and use that to be preeminent in what you do, and use that stage to impact and help others. That's where real lasting happiness is. And so, I love the work I do. I'm working with the Karuk tribe now in northern California and southern Oregon. We're putting together trainings there and leadership trainings for Native youth. And if you look at something the media hasn't covered a whole lot of at all, the Standing Rock Sioux that have been opposing this pipeline because it's going to potentially severely damage and poison the water supply for that part of the world. The way that the Native youth of this generation, after 20 years of the work we've been doing with United National Indian Tribal Youth, to get together and organize and get their message out, and 150 tribes got together peacefully and said, this is not right. There's a better way to do this without risking the permanent damage to the environment and the water supply. That's one thing I'm just passionate about, is seeing these kids tell their stories with passion and with love and with courage and with respect. And we also do work with sojourners and domestic violence. Here's a stat for you that has to do with youth. 92% of women in domestic violence relationships have had a head injury in the last year. 88% have had multiple head injuries, traumatic brain injuries. But here's the statistic. Their kids, 50% of their kids have had traumatic brain injuries, and 55% of those kids are under 5. So everybody goes, that's so terrible. I'm going, no, it's not, because now we know. We know what was always there. So I had a bunch of my fellow incredible former NFL players, Derek Kennard from the Cowboys, who played with the Cardinals, and Michael Bankston and Kwame Lassiter, and they're just wonderful guys with huge hearts. And we went to the first ever national conference here in Phoenix. They'll have another one at USC next year with sojourners about this. And right before I went on to speak at the luncheon, Derek Kennard looked at me. And Derek is 6'2", 340 pounds. He's a tough guy. He's a wonderful guy. But he said, Nick, I had a domestic violence situation in my life. And I waited to hear something, disturbing, but something I could handle. He goes, when I was 6, I was standing in the doorway of my home, and I watched my uncle take a shotgun to the head of my father and blow his head off to save my mother. And it's just horrible. I'm just telling it the way he said it to shock some people.
Wow.
But it's this untold story. Think about being 6 years old and witnessing that in front of yourself, not having the emotional, spiritual equipment to deal with that. And yet Derek turned his life into an example of a champion. And I think we as professional athletes, we have a chance to, educate people, not necessarily, I'll just throw it out there, not necessarily by kneeling at the national anthem, but by what we do outside the stadium, as how we live our lives, as we talk to people, what we do to lead people by example. And that's what I love about working with the guys here, the NFL players. They all have huge hearts. They all are just hungry to make a difference. And there's just one example of stuff we're doing, and just love the work, man. The chance we get, the spotlight to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, and speaking of making a difference in the world, right? You're also doing some work to help raise money for schools over in Uganda, right?
Man, you were paying attention. Yeah, it's just funny. I'm actually on the board of Friends of Africa, and I'm doing something called Kicking for Africa next week with Father Robert Aliunzi, who was an orphan at the age of 6 in northern Uganda. And this is to build a school for orphans in Moyo, which is a town of 7,000 in northern Uganda, reasonably safe area. And with the Archdiocese of Phoenix. And, once again, every one of these things is just helping young people, helping us as adults find our purpose, find our sense that we can make a difference, because when you live life and you don't think, but you know you're making a difference, every second, every breath is a little bit more full of fresh oxygen. Every day has more meaning, and every day has just that little bit more light. And people know that. You attract better people into your life, and hopefully you inspire others too.
Bob, more for Nick?
That is some great stuff there. And one more question about the on-the-field stuff, Nick. We've always heard, and I think we might have talked about this with you in the past, about freezing kickers, and it seems like they're doing it less now than they did maybe 20 years ago, Nick.
Yeah.
I don't know if they
Right.
think these guys are better or whatever, but I wanted to know, when you were put in that situation for that minute or two or three,
right.
How did you handle it mentally? What were you thinking about? Did you shut off everything, or did you just have the same mindset as you did a minute earlier?
Listen, man, that's your moment on the stage. So the great kickers, myself, Morton Anderson, Gary Anderson, the guys that have that mental strength, that helps them. You get an extra minute, that's a gift. But the difference is you don't stand in the middle of the field, God bless him, like Scott Norwood, just sitting about it, sitting there thinking about it. You don't sit in the middle of the field. Rich Carlos, who was a very good kicker, we called 2 straight timeouts with his barefoot on a freezing game in Kansas City. He ended up hooking the ball and hit the upright, and he was a very good kicker. But I would just say, man, this is my time. I'd run right back to the sidelines, kick into the net, take control of that moment, then run out maybe 10 seconds earlier than I normally would. So I had a little bit more time to line up anyway, and now it's still my time, and I'm taking control. So the answer is, when you call a timeout and you're doing it to a very good kicker, it helps him. If it's a below average kicker, it might make a difference.
Wow, good stuff.
Nick, we've already talked about a lot of things that you're involved with, and and the list continues to go on and on. One of your initiatives that's near and dear to my heart, has been your Champions Against Bullying, in particular cyberbullying that that our kids have to deal with now, right? And Nick, and it's not just kids anymore, right? We see some of our guests, and another good friend of the show, one of our very good loyal listeners, have had to shut down their Twitter feeds because they're being stalked or threatened by people online.
Yep.
Talk about the things that that you're dealing with and you're talking with kids about.
Well, first of all, 40% of people in the workplace are bullied. And once again, there's just like the polls on the presidential campaign, that's just who's reporting it, So the truth is that bullies are more sophisticated than ever. But what I spoke to the Jones-Gordon School on Friday about, which is a school of 120 kids in 12 grades total, 10 kids on average per grade, learning disabled kids, kids with autism, kids with dyslexia, kids with Asperger's, kids with cerebral palsy, ADHD, etc. They're all made fun of. And what was really cool is that school, they have such a pervasive sense in what a horrible word to use. You come into that school, there's a sense, and this is what learning is really important for people that are wondering what it's really about. When you create an unconditional, loving environment where those kids know they can have permission to make mistakes, whether it's permission to miss field goals, not intentionally, but permission to practice your art, your craft, that's how they learn faster. They go into life with a sense of confidence. So I tell them, people that tend to bully are people that don't realize, and unfortunately have been traumatized to not realize that God's given them unique gifts in how to take in the world, how to express themselves, how they think, their culture, their environment, all those things, and then how they express it. It doesn't have to be just, in art or in music or et cetera, but how they express their talents. When they have that sense of uniqueness, then they have a sense of identity that's much stronger. And when you know who the heck you are, you give other people permission to be themselves as well. And those are the people that don't tend to bully. The people that do bully are those that just haven't found themselves. They feel guilty being themselves. They've been punished and guilted into feeling they have to be something that they're not. So creating an environment where the athletes who can be the dominant part of a young culture in a school use that stage to say, you know what, I've been given some attention, but I want you to know you're pretty cool too. And you're just as powerful and just as important as I am. I may be the star quarterback like Carson Jones at Queen Creek High School, who started sitting with Shy Johnson, who is a developmentally disabled young lady who was being bullied. But he started sitting with her at lunch, and suddenly Tucker Workman, his star running back, sat with her, and suddenly she blossomed. Her personality blossomed. You know what, today, not only did they turn into an undefeated state championship team, she has her own website. She's got her boyfriend. She's got business cards. She's a public speaker. And this is a girl who, has had challenges, but she turned it around, and she had incredible insight into the personalities on that team. So I'm really fascinated as a kicker. You notice what all these, under that incredible pressure of kicking field goals, all that time waiting on the sidelines, you notice these temptations to have your mind wander either in a positive or a negative direction. So how you control your mind and how you intentionally set it to pull in good energy and to be creative and to find ways around those times when we feel negative or sad, etc. That's, to me, the biggest journey of life. And when you've figured some of that out, man, you start giving that power to other people, and every day is a beautiful ride.
Nick, just a couple more before we let you go. And to that point, right, we often talk to kickers, and they, sort of align themselves with golfers, right? I mean, between the swing of the leg and the swing of the golf club and all of those sorts of things. But as you mentioned a moment ago, mentally tough, right? You got to be mentally tough to be a kicker. And you do have a lot of downtime on the sidelines to, think about things and let the negative thoughts creep in and all that sort of stuff. When you're talking to, young kickers and that sort of thing, how do you tell them to, prepare themselves and to make themselves mentally tough?
Well, let me just start off by saying, you use the analogy of golf. Those people that watch the Ryder Cup, I just did an event with Ian Poulter, who was a couple years ago a very successful captain for the European team. Did you notice how inspired so many of the players were? Hit shots. I mean, we already knew they were good, but some of those shots were just unbelievable. That's because they were playing for something bigger than themselves, And for some of them, it gave them permission to pull their heads out of their collective rear ends, taking it too seriously, and think, man, I'm helping my team. I'm helping my country. You saw it, obviously, with the performances of the U.S. team, the greatest Olympic performance in the history of our country. I don't know why we haven't made a bigger deal out of it. The United States absolutely had the greatest Olympic performance ever. I mean, not just the gymnastics and the track, but it's comprehensively incredible stuff. So whatever we're doing with sports psychology, we're figuring out things. I know they had some pet dogs in the locker room for the swimmers, and that, of course, is an amazing performance, too. Maybe those dogs grounded them. But to get back to your other question about other kickers, the best book I ever read, and the simplest way to start, is a book not about kicking, but it's called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it's by Timothy Galway, and it's got a picture of a bouncing tennis ball on it. And what it basically says is you watch this guy playing tennis, and he's swearing at himself when he hits the ball in the net, and he goes, there's a conversation going on. There's self one and self two. Self one is judging, and self two is listening. And so when you start taking control and basically getting your brain, your mind out of the way to allow yourself to do what you already know how to do, that's kind of the simplicity of what you try to do. So when you train, you make every single practice, every single kick, every detail about, hey, what's it smell like out there? What's it sound like? What am I feeling like? I'm going to feel this way. And put yourself in that situation. What's the score of the game? What's the condition of the field? What's the wind? So when you practice it so much, your cells in your body emotionally are rehearsed. It feels more like your own birthday party. You prepared for it, and then you're ready for it. And that's what every human being can do, is prepare for one skill set with incredible. We all have been given the gift to be unbelievably good at one particular skill set. And as a kicker, that's your job. So when kickers remember that and start practicing with that sense that every single kick matters in practice, and of course it's true for every team in every position, they become more consistent as well. They should look at themselves as being the PhDs of pressure. They're the guys that can handle it better than anybody.
There you go. Nick, before we let you go, remind our listeners, how can they stay up to date with all the great things that you're doing, whether it's online or over social media?
Well, thank you, guys. Well, my Twitter is @LoweryNick, and you can find me on Facebook, but it's nicklowry.org, NICKLOWERY.org, or my speaking is @LowerySpeaks, LowerySpeaks.com. And I really appreciate the way you guys ask questions and give me a chance to help people know about what I do. And, without the great storytellers in the world, we can't get out the stories and the values of a society that are good in the midst of all the, the normal news negativity that's out there.
Nick, thank you so much for being such a great guest and continuing to come back on the show. Like I said at the top, it's always a better segment when you're involved. We can't thank you enough for your friendship and, all the times you've been a part of the show. We hope you'll come back again soon and keep us up to date with all the great stuff that you're doing. Thanks,
guys. You're the best. I really enjoy it. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. All the best to you and your family, my friend. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That is former Kansas City Chiefs and New York Jets Pro Bowl kicker Nick Lowery. And, Bob, for all the wonderful times that we've had an opportunity, 8 times now that Nick has been a part of the show. So getting to talk with him and have him, educate us. It seems like we always learn so much when he comes on the show. And on top of that, he's doing so many great things, as he talked about, around the world. It's not just here in the States and, with Native Americans and kids and, the folks here, where Nick lives out, out on the West Coast, but it's, Uganda and all over the place. What a great guy.
Yeah, I think you and I are alike in the fact that we feel like we're sitting in a classroom when Nick speaks. We learn so much, and he's such a great orator, and I don't know about you, Chris, probably the smartest guy I've run into. I mean, you're not going to find any more intelligent men that will speak to, but my goodness, the Ivy League education, it comes right out every time we speak with him, but he puts it into so many different areas of his life, and I just love his positivity. And he could talk technical, but he could also talk, about kindness and what makes the world go around. And this guy, it just rubs off, Chris. He's a tremendous guy, and we'll probably have him on another 8 times, and we'll still be raving about him.
That's exactly right. All right, now back with us and making his 9th appearance on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Thursday Night Tailgate Hall of Famer Ed White. And let me remind you a little bit more about Ed's background. He's from San Diego, California, played his college ball at the University of California as well, where he was an All-American defensive lineman and was inducted into their Athletic Hall of Fame. He played guard in the NFL for an amazing 17 seasons from 1969 to 1985 for the Vikings and the Chargers. He was a 4-time Pro Bowl selection, played in all 4 Super Bowls for the Minnesota Vikings during the 1970s, one of only 10 players to be able to do that. He is a member of the Vikings' 25th and 40th anniversary teams and has been named as one of the 50 greatest Vikings of all time. He is also on the San Diego Chargers' 40th and 50th anniversary teams and is a member of their Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame back in 2000, and he is also a member of the Breitbart Hall of Fame, the East-West Shrine Game Hall of Fame, and last September we inducted him into the Thursday Night Tailgate Hall of Fame. So, we also need to mention, by the way, he's one of the greatest artists you'll find anywhere on the planet. Go check out his artwork at edwhiteart.com, and beyond all of that, he's a really great guy. And we're delighted he is back with us again tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Ed, Chris, and Bob, how have you been, my friend?
Welcome back,
Chris and
Ed.
Bob, doing good, guys. How are you guys doing?
Excellent.
Oh, really good. Thank you, Ed.
Good.
So, Ed,
good.
I wanted to start off our time with you tonight. You played, on the greatest, Vikings teams of all time. You go back to the 1970s, and you practiced on the opposite side of the line, right, from the famous Purple People leaders, guys like Carl Eller and Alan Page, Jim Marshall, Gary Larson. So I wanted to get your thought. What are some of your favorite stories, about that time and about practicing against those guys when you're sitting around talking to your buddies?
Well, I came to the realization after being on 2 good offensive lines that it takes a good defensive line to make a good offensive line and vice versa. And I think that the fact that I lined up against Alan Page every afternoon for 9 seasons made me obviously a lot better offensive guard. By the time Sunday rolled around, that player I was playing against didn't have quite all the tools that Alan was dealing with. So it's a big benefit to have excellent players to work against.
And to that point, if you expand, sort of beyond your own team, right? You played against, obviously, my favorite Steelers, right? The guys back from the 70s.
Right.
You played against them in
Good example.
in the Super Bowl, and you played, games against, Dallas and the Doomsday defense, the fearsome foursome with the Rams, Ray Nitschke and those Packers, Dick Butkus and the Bears. What was it like for you, going up against, those guys?
Well, I kind of have to laugh a little bit when I hear about how much faster and bigger and stronger they are, because every middle linebacker in the black and blue division, the Central Division, when I played, was at least 6'5", 260 pounds. I mean, they were animals. Ray Nitschke, Mike Lucci, Lonnie Warwick on our team, on and on and on. The guy that played for the Redskins, Tommy Novus. Those guys were big, talented people, and that's basically it was a defense that kind of sat in place. Pretty much played against a four-man front for a long time. The guy was right over your nose. We've talked about this, and then the AFC started moving them around and putting them on the center and doing some different things. But we were mano for a long, long time against. The Bob Browns of the world, who, Jerry Burns, our coordinator, the night before the game said that Bob Brown's forearms looked like telephone poles. That's what the last thing I went to my room thinking about. And there were. So they were big men. They were giants. They were fast. Doug Atkins, was like the college hurdling champion when he was in college, and he was huge.
And when you look at both of your former teams, now, right, the Vikings clearly on the upswing, right? Looking at those guys, 4-0, Bob and I,
yes.
We'll be talking about them a little bit later in the show, and they've got a really stout defense that's looking really good. You got to be excited about what you're seeing from the Vikings so far this season.
I am, and it starts with the coaches. The head guy is obviously he's a defensive guy, but that team is. I really respect watching the way they are as men on the field. They're not a bunch of, pardon me, jackasses out there and individuals. They're part of a team, and he's building the same thing. He's building a defense. I've never seen a team tackle like they do. They're phenomenal tacklers. I mean, just unbelievable sure tacklers, but I mean with purpose and with some force. And they tackle together. There's more than one guy in on a tackle. That's impressive to me, and that builds an offensive line on the other side of the ball that has that toughness and tenacity too. And that's what they've got going. The Chargers have had so many injuries and so many over the last few years in the offensive line, and building a defense. They're not in the same spot in terms of the construction of the team. So I know. They've been disappointed, but you look at Minnesota and they lose their quarterback, they lose their running back, two of the top guys in the league, and they just keep rolling. They're just impressive.
Bob, questions for Ed?
It's always a pleasure, Ed, and every time it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And every time I think of those old Viking teams, I have to remind myself this is a guy, Ed White, who grew up in California, went to school and college in California, and then spends 9 years outdoors at Metropolitan Stadium. Now, Ed, is there some kind of, should we say, learning curve or frigid curve to get used to that kind of cold? Because the memories I had as a kid was watching guys like you come out of a huddle and just smoke blowing out of your mouth on the TV screen like it was no tomorrow. But tell us about... Yeah. How it was getting used to it. I just don't know if you ever do and how hard that field was.
I'll tell you, things appeared much more significant than they were. And the case in point is the coldest game I played in was when I was in San Diego, and we played Cincinnati. I never played in a game that cold.
True.
And so on any particular Sunday, there were a lot of games that looked good for the cameras with the snow coming down or the field being, the ice being melted. But in terms of cold, it was never that bad. And the huge advantage that we had was it threw the opponent totally off. And fortunately, we paid the Rams and the 49ers, late in the playoff picture, and it was a big advantage for us. And I recall when we went back there and it was questionable weather, our equipment man, Sid Brooks, went crazy. He had scuba gloves, and so your attention went to how do I stay warm instead of how do I execute my job, And I think that, I think going indoors makes it even harder for the Vikings to. It takes away a little bit of an edge they had, in my opinion.
And we always mention, Ed, how big these guys are coming out of college. I don't know. I don't have a number in mind, but the average lineman, these guys are like 6'3", 6'4", 310 now. And I was just wondering, and not being critical of them, and you just want to get an expert's opinion like yourself. Watching them as often as you may do you think that they lack a little bit of technique that is made up for by their size?
I haven't spent 6 years coaching in the league, and then in college I coached. I think, and I had a chance to talk with Howard Mudd this past summer. We were hunting pheasant together, and Howard has a theory that the players, and he's a player as well, have negotiated the contract so well that they've cut down to where there's no more double days. I don't think. I think they only hit 1 day a week, and it's limited. And I think it probably has affected the linemen from a health standpoint because they don't get to bang. And I think banging is important. You got to. It's a thing that builds the strength in the body as well, and I think that it's limited. I think technically they're not as technical as perhaps we were when we had more time to work on technique, and so I think Howard's points are right on the mark.
Hey Ed, our next guest who's hanging on the line is a Pro Football Hall of Fame nose tackle Curley Culp, and we're going to get to Curley here in just a couple of minutes.
He's my fishing buddy.
I wanted to get your thoughts and memories of playing against Curley. I know you guys went against each other, back in the day in the Super Bowl when he was with Kansas City. But what do you remember about going up against Curley?
Well, I got to say some good things, or he won't tell me what's the right bait to use next time we fish. Curley, it was obviously he's in the Hall of Fame. Such a unique talent with the combination of his strength and quickness and size and his intelligence. He's a bright guy, and that's a lethal combination. That's the lethal combination. And he played hard. He played 60 minutes of football, and he's a great guy. And to me, he's just one of the good guys that played in the league.
So we talked about your former team, the Vikings, and how well their season has started off. On the opposite side of the coin, your San Diego Chargers, I'm guessing are continuing to confound and frustrate the Charger fans. Finished 4-12 last year. They're off to a 1-3 start. So curious to get your thoughts. What needs to change in order for the Chargers to get back to being a playoff team?
Yeah, that's always such a hard question. It's like, people, ask me a lot about what did the Vikings do wrong, losing 4 Super Bowls. I will say this, and I haven't been super close, but I do watch all the Charger games. I'm a Charger fan, and I really feel like they are so close, but there's some little thing missing because they, and Curley will confirm this because I know he watched the Kansas City game too. They whipped Kansas City's fanny for three-quarters of the game, and for some reason it fell apart in the last quarter. So that, as a coach and a player, those coaches are preparing those guys for the game in terms of game planning and the physical, how to approach the game. There's a lot of things going on that are positive there for them to be able to do that. And this is exactly what happened last week, too, the same scenario. And there's just, they've got to figure out that little ingredient of finishing, how they start and play the majority of the game. Because they have been as dominating as the Vikings have been, and I've watched them both closely. The first three quarters of the Kansas City game and last week's game, and it's they've got to play four quarters of that. So I don't think, I think uprooting and firing and all that causes you to take two steps back and then maybe one step forward and maybe two and maybe three, but you don't know that. But I think that I like the management, and I like the coaching staff.
And one more before we let you go, and we've said this many times. You're one of the best artists anywhere on the planet. Update us on your artwork and what people can see when they go on your website, edwhiteart.com.
Well, I'm, I can't. It's, for me, it's just about the journey, and I try to. When I fish with Curley and the boys down at the Grand Isles, I'm painting, and I think I painted him a picture. I don't remember, but wherever it is, whatever we're doing, that's what I'm doing, and it's what I love to do. It's me, and it's my record of my path, my journey. So that's kind of what I do. I'm an environmentalist. I studied environmental design at Berkeley and have a degree in that, and it's my love. Landscape architecture was my major, and I'm a 350-pound guy that likes flowers, so I paint a lot of flowers. I know that sounds funny, but I think that it keeps me happy, and so I do a lot of things. I do a lot of abstracts and a lot of still life type stuff, and I just have fun. I got a call from Carl today, and I had gone back for an autograph thing, and we watched the game together, and all we talked about was art. Carl is a ceramic; he does bowls and things, and we talked about art again for an hour, and it was fantastic. And so it's just what I am. I've been fortunate. I have to disagree with Nick on the fact that you can be blessed in one area. Everybody is blessed in one area. I think I was blessed in two, thank goodness. And but I do want to say I'm on Facebook with Nick, and I see what he's doing. And in fact, I do a thing with the Native American kids coaching. And last 2 years ago, I took my art to the Native tribes, to the Hopis in New Mexico. And he goes every year. He went to Oklahoma this year with the group, but his whole life is about helping kids and helping people, and I think it's fantastic. It's awesome.
Yes, it is. Ed, remind our listeners one more time, how can they follow you and see your artwork, both online and over social media as well?
It's edwhiteabstracts.com and edwhiteart.com. And I'm going to be on another site called Art Loops, LOUPES, capital L.com or .org. I don't know which. One or the other. Anyway.
Ed, thank you so much
you guys.
for all your support over the years and
Thanks,
for
Bob.
being so great to us. We think the world of you.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way, and as I've told you many times before, you breathe life in us old guys. That we were all once on a pedestal, and now we're below a pedestal. You become from something, you become less than something, and it feels good. And I appreciate the help that you do for me and all the guys. It's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Keep it up.
Thank you very much, Ed. And we look forward to having you back on the show soon. In between now and then, my friend, all the best to you and your family.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed.
Take care, Ed.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
that is former Vikings and Chargers Pro Bowl and College Football Hall of Famer Ed White. And, boy, Bob, we say it a lot on this show, but, boy, they just don't get better than Ed White.
Love that man, and he is what it might be a cliche, Chris, the gentle giant. Do you agree? I mean, he's just so laid back.
Right.
Must be all those flowers he's doing, but he's just such a just an inspirational type of guy, and speaks so calmly about some incredible rough times in Minnesota back in the day. But what a career. And you and I say it almost all the time. A shame that man is not in the Hall of Fame. And,
yes, it is. Absolutely.
That'll be on our bucket list, Chris, to see him get in. We hope to be there.
Yes, absolutely right. I'm sitting here in my Ed White jersey, so that's how much I have, how much respect I have for that man. All right, now joining us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Hall of Fame defensive tackle Curley Culp. Let me give you some more background on Curley. He's from Yuma, Arizona, played his college ball at Arizona State, where he played both offensive and defensive line. In 1966, he earned all Western Athletic Conference honors as a defensive lineman. 1967 was a huge year for Curley. He was again named All-WAC Conference and All-American. He also won the NCAA Wrestling National Championship as a heavyweight. In the championship match, folks, pinned his opponent in 51 seconds, his 15th straight pin. He was inducted into the Arizona Wrestling Hall of Fame and named Arizona State Athlete of the Year. And, folks, he was voted male student with the best smile and homecoming king that year as well. 1968, he was named to the Olympic Wrestling Squad. 1972, he was inducted into the Arizona State Sports Hall of Fame. He was a second-round draft pick by the Denver Broncos in 1968. He went from Denver to Kansas City later that year, and we'll talk about that and why in a minute. He played in the league from 1969 to 1981 for the Chiefs, Oilers, and Lions. At 6'1", 265, he played nose tackle for the Chiefs, and he was absolutely unblockable. He helped lead the Chiefs to a victory in Super Bowl IV over the Vikings. You heard us talking about that with Ed White a moment ago. He was an AFL All-Star in 1969, and after the merger, he was selected to the Pro Bowl 6 more times. He was named the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year in 1975, and in 2013, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we're very excited he is with us tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Curley, Chris, and Bob here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank
Curley.
you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Curley, let's go back to your time at Arizona State. You could play both offensive and defensive line, so I'm curious, how was the decision made that you would finally end up as a defensive lineman?
I played mostly defense in my high school in Yuma High. I never did play much offense, although I did have an opportunity to play fullback, I think, one game when the starting fullback got injured. But typically I was a defensive lineman. At Arizona State, I started out, I guess, at the offensive line. I blocked a little bit for Reggie Jackson before he decided to go play football. But after my freshman year, I think it was, I started playing primarily the defensive line.
And, like I mentioned in the intro, Curley, you were voted male student athlete with the best smile and homecoming king your senior year. That had to be pretty rare, at the time, for an African American man to be, recognized like that, late 60s. Curious, what was that like for you?
Well, that was a good experience. I had a good team of advocates pumping me out pretty good. In fact, that Mr. Smile situation, they had I guess it was a gallon jug that you put money in, and whoever collected the most money in a short period of time would be the winner of that Howlin' Smile King. So that was pretty neat. But being the homecoming king was really special because of the fact that things going on in the country like it was, and it was unfortunate that I guess Frank Kush, he really he's a great coach and all that, but he didn't really want me to go out at halftime and celebrate. I had to go out in my uniform, smelling like a goat, and being there with Carol and Chris on the podium, and all that. But it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
When you get to Kansas City, like I say, you're a part of their Super Bowl IV championship team. You heard us talking, I'm assuming, with our previous guest, Vikings Pro Bowl guard Ed White. Curious to get your thought. What do you remember about playing against Ed and the Vikings that year?
Well, that was a year when I guess Kansas City, we basically had a four-man front, but we had something called a triple and the under. A triple was a defense where we slid to the strength of formation, and the under was a defense we slid away from the formation. But I think in that particular game, Hank Stram came up with an idea. He wanted me to kind of focus on the center, so I was kind of mainly, for the most part of that game, over Mike Tingelhoff. And it was a situation that I think he was outmanned a little bit because, he wasn't really used to someone being over his nose like that. And with the help of Buck Buchanan, Aaron Brown, and Jerry Mays, we kind of had our way with the offensive line that game.
Bob, questions for Curley?
Hey, thanks for coming on, Curley. Always a pleasure. And I'm looking back at before you got to the NFL. That we always like to ask our guests about the draft day, Curley. In 1968, I'm looking back at that draft. And I'm counting at least 8 Hall of Famers that came out of that draft. It was incredible. People don't realize guys like Claude Humphrey and Ron Yeri and Zonka and yourself and Stabler, and I can go on. And then had guys like Haven, Moses, Forrest, Blue that didn't make all. It was just an incredible all-around draft. Just wanted to know your expectations on draft day and how it all shook out.
Well, I was a two-sport individual. I played football and also did wrestling, so that was the time of the year when I was wrestling. My main focus that time of the year was, competing on the wrestling match. I got the call. I was in my dorm room. I got the call and saying I was, drafted by the Denver Broncos. I was excited about it, and moved on from that. But my main focus was wrestling, and I was very fortunate to be able to, get drafted so high with the Denver Broncos. And I guess the other thing is that well, that's a different story.
Well, I was going to definitely ask you about Hank Stram too, Curly. I mean, to me, I remember Hank not just as a broadcaster, but when he was coaching, just seemed like such a good motivator. We still had the audio of him before games. How was he as a coach as far as a motivator?
He was a great coach. I mean, he did a lot of things differently than a lot of other coaches. They were very organized. He had a great staff, and we were well prepared for games. In fact, there was one time when we went doing some of the things psychologically, even brought in the psychiatrists to come in and talk to us and try to get us back on the right track. But the staff was great, and we kind of knew what we had to do to win week in and week out, and they motivated us very, very effectively.
And Curly, kind of going back to, being drafted in the second round by the Broncos, but you end up, obviously, going to Kansas City. What led to the Broncos letting their second-round draft pick go to the Chiefs?
Well, Denver Broncos didn't have a first-round draft, but typically I was their first draft choice because I was the first guy picked in the second round. But that year, as you talked earlier about all those individuals that had an opportunity to go to the college all-star game, like Haven Moses, Claude Humphrey, and all the others. And so I reported to Denver a little late because of the college all-star game. I think they had maybe 2 weeks of training camp prior to me getting there. And when I got there, they wanted to stick me in as an offensive guard. And like I said earlier, I never played offense that much in college. In fact, I had that one small spring session. But the majority of the time I was defense. And then get to a level of play like the National Football League and trying to play offensive guard. I told Lou Saban, I'll give it a try, But my heart wasn't in it. They wanted me, I guess, because of my size, my quickness. They thought I was ideal for an offensive guard, but I didn't like it at all. Eventually, they had an opportunity to put me in at defensive tackle. I think that was the last preseason game. I graded well, but they had a guy by the name of Dave Costa, I believe. He was the stalwart for a defensive line. But Lou, chose to get rid of me, and Hank Stram picked me up, and the rest is history.
So, Curly, when you're sitting around, whether it's out fishing with Ed White or, some of the other, peers that you played with or friends, family, talk about what are some of the favorite stories that you like to share with folks?
Well, I'm not very talkative when it comes to football that much. If they ask me a question, I try to answer it intelligently, but I'm not a great storyteller. I'm more of a listener than anything else. But some of the times people ask me things about the Super Bowl. How was it like to be in the Super Bowl, being in Tulane Stadium, and being second year in the league, and how great that was, and how the difference is between now and then. It's such a big difference now. Because of the influx of the finances in it, and how much of a big entertainment focus it is, and all of those things kind of play into it. But I really enjoyed the experience, mainly because I was on a team that had great athletes. They had been to the #1 Super Bowl in Los Angeles, lost against Green Bay, and this was the 4th Super Bowl, and everybody kind of knew what it took, and they kind of they shared those kind of stories with me and try to motivate me, saying these are the things you need to do to focus on to be the best person you can be on the football field. And all those things kind of work together to solidify, the offense and defense and special teams and all that. So we went down to Tulane, and everybody was kind of pretty psyched up. Even though we were underdogs, we knew that we had a good opportunity to do well and play well in that game.
And Curley, when you got to Houston, you played with the Oilers from '74 to '79, and back then the Houston Oilers were in the AFC Central Division, so you were battling the Steelers during sort of the height of their run in the '70s. What do you remember about battling against those guys?
Well, what can you say bad about the Pittsburgh Steelers? They're a dominant team. In fact, in 1978, 1979, we played in the AFC Championship game. And that second game, it was a kind of a contest in which we felt that if the instant replay would have been in play, that game the end results would have been a little different. And even losing the game and then coming back to Houston and the fans at the Astrodome, I think they had over 60,000. That was a very moving experience. After you lose a game, you're all downtrodden and everything. You kind of deflated a little bit, and you come back home and you have that kind of reception. It was just a phenomenal thing. And I have great memories of the Houston Oilers, the Love You Blue era, and Bum Phillips was one special coach.
Bob, more for Curley?
Yeah, exactly. That was my next question, Curley, about your other coach, your Bum Phillips, and we've talked to other guys like Dan Pastorini about him. Everyone got an idea that he was almost like a cult hero, showing up at the games with the cowboy boots and the cowboy hat, and we thought of him probably outside of football, but there are people out there that told us the guy truly knew the game and his X's and O's.
Yes, he did. When I try to contrast his style of leadership between Hank and Bum, they're two different styles, but they're both successful. Hank did well in his coaching career, and Bum did his thing. But Bum was kind of a more, I think, laid back, so to speak. Kind of let guys kind of work together, do their own thing. And I think Hank Stram was more bureaucratic, if you might say, than Bum was. But they both did well. I mean, they had some good people surrounding them, had good staffs. But we were very blessed. We didn't have the athletes that I was fortunate enough to play with in Kansas City, in Houston. And anytime we get a chance to talk to a Hall of Famer, that day of the induction, Curley, guys like Chris Carter and Larry Allen and Jonathan Ogden and Warren Sapp, and there's so many guys that were semifinalists and finalists that didn't get in that were just superstars. It must have been a very, very emotional day for you. What were your best memories of that day? Well, to have an opportunity, to play in the National Football League for those many years and not really expecting to be, inducted in the Football Hall of Fame, and then being there to actually thank all those individuals that were very instrumental in your growth and development over the years, and have my family there, and it was very emotional. I mean, it probably didn't seem like it was emotional for me, but it was. And I really enjoyed the experience, and I continue to look at it as a very special situation. In fact, I go back every year and try to be a part of the new inductees coming in. And the National Football League, in relationship to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they're two separate entities. But to be able to play and still be able to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame is very special, because some of the the tenets that they talk about is, honoring the heroes of the game, promote its values, and and celebrate excellence everywhere. And those are kind of the three of the four pillars that we stand for. And I really appreciate being an ambassador for those concepts.
And Curley, in the course of your induction speech, you talked about football being more than just a sport, that it taught you the value of teamwork. Talk about what football taught you beyond the X's and the O's.
Well, as you stated, I think teamwork is part of it. Sacrifices, failure. I mean, it teaches you. Just because you fail, I think failure is a part of success, because when you fail, you realize you made a mistake, you correct those mistakes, and then eventually you become better at it. And so football has a tendency to help you do that. And this the respect that you obtain or develop with the other players by doing things the right way, and the leadership that comes into play is when you have a commonality as a focal point to do things correctly. Practices how you practice. Coaches say, well, you practice like you play. So if you practice well, that means you're going to probably do well in the game. And you kind of perfect those things, so those things become normal experiences in the actual contest.
Curley, before we let you go, how can our listeners follow you and stay up to date with the things you're doing, whether it's online or over social media?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I don't really talk much on Facebook. I do have a few Facebook friends, like Ed was saying. I follow him and his art. He's such a fantastic artist. And then Nick Lowery, he's one of my Facebook buddies as well. So I kind of follow that. And then I have a website, www.curleyculp.com. It just kind of explains everything that I'm doing and trying to do. But that's about it.
Curley, we've got so many questions that we'd love to get your thoughts and insights on. We hope you'll come back and join us again sometime. It was great having you as part of the show tonight.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Curley.
All right, Curley, take care. We look forward to catching up with you hopefully again soon. All the best to you and your family.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Good night.
That is Pro Football Hall of Famer Curley Culp. Bob, you want to talk about a guy that just overpowered people. Right? I mean, that's unbelievable. I watched. If you go out on YouTube, you can find his wrestling match as a senior at Arizona State when he is going for the national championship, and 15 straight pins, and pinned the guy in 51 seconds. It was sort of a la Mike Tyson, if you will, as a wrestler. I mean, unbelievable strength and speed that Curley had. And again, for a guy that was 6'1", 265, playing nose tackle, and guys just could not block him.
Yeah, total strength, Chris, and kind of revolutionized that position. I mean, he was something, and that's football royalty there. Some of my earliest days was watching him, and those old teams, your Buck Buchanans, and you remember Willie Lanier's, those guys, those teams in Kansas
Our friend
City,
Bobby
the whole
Bell.
Arrowhead experience. Yeah, exactly. And when Arrowhead opened in '72. Culp was a major part of that whole thing, and guys like J.J. Bird and Eddie Kennelson will say, they'll be the first to say that Curley Culp was one of the early forerunners of that whole Chief and Sea of Red movement, and it was an honor to speak with him.
Yes, it was. All right, before we get to our next guest, Craig Wolfley, I want to give a shout-out to our good friend Renee Shaw over at Career Engagement Institute. Folks, if you're upside down in your career, and what do we mean by that? You're ready to move on, right? Go to careerengagement.institute online to see how Renee can help you. You've heard, some of our guests, Toy Cook not all that long ago singing Renee's praises. And if you work with her for 2 minutes, you're going to understand why Toy did that and why we brag on Renee every single week here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Folks, we all want to work with someone who we can trust and who actually has our best interest at heart, and you know how rare it is to find somebody like that. Well, you're not going to find someone who fits that description any better than Renee Shell does. She's smart, she's creative, she's very talented, the kind of person you want to work with and have working for you. She's been doing some great things from some of our guests who have been in transition from being pro athletes and are now getting into the job market. But, folks, I'm telling you, Renee is just the very best. There isn't a better way to describe her than that. If you're an athlete or anybody in the job market, do yourself a favor and reach out to Renee. You're going to be so very glad that you did. Go to careerengagement.institute online and give her a follow on Twitter @IntegratedPlay. All right, now joining us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Craig Wolfley. Let me give you some more background on Craig. He is from Buffalo, New York, played his college ball at Syracuse, where he was a 4-year letterman and helped them to a victory in the 1979 Independence Bowl. That was Syracuse's first bowl victory in nearly 20 years. In 1999, he was named to the Syracuse University Football All-Century team with the likes of people like Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Larry Zonka, Marvin Harrison, Darrell Johnston, John Mackey, Art Monk, and Donovan McNabb. Craig was a 5th-round draft pick by my Pittsburgh Steelers back in 1980, and he played in the league for 12 seasons, 10 with the Steelers and 2 with the Vikings. Craig was voted by Steelers fans to their all-century team. Away from football, Craig has competed in weightlifting, boxing, sumo wrestling, and martial arts. In 1981, he finished 5th in the World's Strongest Man competition, and in 1985, he placed 2nd in the first professional sumo wrestling tournament held here in North America, and he also holds a black belt in jiu-jitsu. You can now hear Craig broadcasting Steeler games along with former Steeler offensive lineman Tunch Ilkin and our friend Bill Hillgrove. As well, you can find them on ESPN Radio up in Pittsburgh, and Craig has a podcast that you can stream from his website, craigwolfley.com. And we're honored that he is joining us here tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Craig, Chris and Bob here. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Craig.
Craig, are you with us? I see him on the switchboard. Craig, can you hear us? Yeah, he may have a bad cell.
Yeah,
hey, Craig, if you can hear us, please give us a call back. It sounds like maybe your cell is sort of digitizing, or maybe we can't really hear you. So, Bob, in the meantime, as we hope to get Craig back on the show, and unfortunately, our good friend Tony Collins wasn't able to join us tonight for our 5-star picks of the week. Let's go through a couple of those picks, and hopefully, in the meantime, we'll be able to get Craig back on the show. Bob, our first game that we wanted to go through this week was the 3-1 Texans going to the 4-0 Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, a 7-point home favorite, and the over/under in that game is 40. So, Bob, I guess the question, we've been talking a lot about, how good the Minnesota Vikings are playing so far this season. Do you think they're going to remain undefeated at the end of this week?
I think they will, Chris. With that defense and the fact that Houston just can't seem, even though they're 3-1, which amazes me, they haven't even reached 70 points yet on the season, Chris. So you can't see Houston putting up more than, my goodness, maybe a couple touchdowns. And just for that fact, and for a team like Minnesota to be home, Chris, yeah, I don't see Houston going up there and winning. So it'll probably be Houston may get 17 points. How about 28-17 Minnesota?
Yeah. And, Bob, I think we've got Craig back on the line. We're going to get to Craig here. Let me just complete this thought. When you think about, to your point, Bob, Texans offense isn't scaring anybody, 29th in the league. And, their defense, currently, number 6, so they were looking pretty good. We'll see if they can keep that up for the rest of the season. Unfortunately, without J.J. Watt. Now, there was a Jadeveon Clowney sighting last week. He actually had a sack. He's got 2 so far this season, so he's up to 6.5 sacks now in his 2+ seasons in the league. We'll see if he's able to step up in Watt's absence. So offensively, the Vikings, they're not scaring anyone either. But I'll tell you what, it looks like Sam Bradford is starting to pick things up with that offense, and he and Stephon Diggs are, looking pretty good together, getting a little chemistry between the two of them. Diggs is 5th in the league in receiving yards. So, and the Vikings are number 1 in the giveaway takeaway ratio, which is always a big indicator for teams are going to be playing well. They're a +10. So I'm with you, Bob. I look for the Vikings to keep things going. Very close to the score, by the way. I like them 24-13. We'll get to some of our other picks here in just a little bit, but hopefully we've got Craig Wolfley on the line with us. Craig, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
There we
go.
Hello?
We got you.
You got me. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, Craig, let's start our time with you by kind of going back to your time when you came into the league back 1980, joined the Steelers at kind of the tail end of the careers of many of, the 70s legends, the Bradshaws, Franco Harrises, our good friend Rocky Bleier. All those guys were still around when you first came in. So curious, what was it like as a rookie getting to play with all of those legends?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I can tell you on the first day, back then, of course, we went to training camp a week earlier than all the vets. So we were up at Latrobe, St. Vincent College, in Latrobe there for a week. And then on the Thursday, after a week up there, the vets started coming into the dining hall. And I remember just sitting there and looking at Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris and John Stallworth, Lynn Swan, then it was John Kolb and Larry Brown. It was Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount, Donnie Shell. I mean, it was like a roll call of future Hall of Famers. And then, of course, comes in one of my personal favorites, Mike Webster, with arms like legs and legs like people. I mean, you didn't even know what to think. I mean, these guys were just so magnificent. And all I kept thinking was, wow, what are we doing? Ton Chilkin, who was my radio compadre there, he looked at me and goes, would it be bad for him to go up and ask for an autograph?
So, Craig, you're a fifth-round draft pick, right? Trying to make a name for yourself, and you're going and practicing. Right. You're going up against the Joe Greens and L.C. Greenwoods and Jack Lamberts. What was it like trying to make a name for yourself as a fifth-round draft pick, trying to make the team, and you're having to try to do that against those guys?
Well, it was a very humbling experience. I mean, that could go through a whole litany of things that just did not go right. I remember the very first day that we were out on the field, we have a conditioning test. We had to run 5 350s. That's, if you run the outside white lines around a football field, it's 350 yards. So you'd start in one corner of the end zone. You got to stay on the outside of the boundary, and you got to run 5 350-yard runs with a 40-second rest in between. And we were turning the laps in 60 to 65 seconds, even as big as we were. And the thing that was amazing was we did that on the first day, and we did that 2 to 4 times a week, even during doubles, after the second practice, after 2.5-hour fully padded practices. So it was Chuck Noll camp was a nightmare. I tell the young guys today, I say, the thing about making a Chuck Noll team, you didn't worry about making the team. You worried about surviving the moment of that day. If there was a tomorrow, then you worried about it enough tomorrows, but just surviving that day was about as much as you could handle. So on the very first day, I ran the 350s, and I was trying to run with Iron Mike Webster, one of my heroes. And so I'm running next to him, and I just barely keep him, just ahead of me, all 5 laps. And by the 5th one, I felt like if you ever watched the movie Aliens, where that critter jumps out of your chest, that's what my heart felt like. My heart was, and I remember laying there, and this shadow came across me as I'm just laying on the ground, screaming for breath there. And I look up, and it's my hero, Mike Webster. And I look up at him, and he looks down at me. I think, oh, he's going to say something like, great effort, kid, way to go. He looks at me and goes, son, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. If it comes down to me having to give you mouth-to-mouth, you die, and I want you to consider yourself a dead man. That was the start of it, and things didn't get much better for a while.
Hey, Craig, talking about Chuck Noll, we've been blessed to have Rocky Bleier and Andy Russell on the show several times, and they've shared some great stories about Chuck Noll. What's your favorite Chuck Noll story?
Oh, there's so many. I can think of, one that just jumps out for whatever reason was Coach Noll wasn't big on cultural things, the culture of the day. He wasn't big on hit movies. He was, if I invited you over and said, I want you guys to come over because I want you to meet this one guy. He's a pilot. This other guy, he's a connoisseur of fine wines. Another guy, he plays the guitar and the ukulele. I want you to meet a boat captain. I want you to meet a football coach. You'd come over thinking you're going to meet about, 10 different guys, and here it all be just Coach Noll. He was just that unique, that different. But for whatever reason, he was never big on the culture of the moment, of what was happening. So in the 80s, up at St. Vincent College, because we had no air conditioning in the dorms, we would, after a night meeting, we would head out to the movie theaters to sit in air conditioning in a movie theater just to cool down. You know, I mean, just to find a little bit of a coolness there. And so we ended up watching the movie Stripes about a dozen times in various ways. So if you remember that with Harold Ramis and Bill Murray and all that stuff, you know, you're in the Army and that. Well, we were jogging from the upper field to the lower field during one morning before doubles. And on the way down, we're all padded up, and it's a horrible morning because you can't see the mountains in the background because the humidity is going to be so high. That was our weather report. If you can't see the mountains, it's a hold on to your butt day. So we're jogging down there, and I'm jogging next to Tunchilkin, and Coach Knoll jogs up next to me, and he goes, I want you two to know you two are last. And right away, we'd just watched Stripes the night before trying to get some stinking air conditioning. And the one part with Sergeant Hulk, and I looked at him and I said, I'm pacing myself, Sergeant. They just looked at me like I had two heads and jogged on. And Tunch turned to me and goes, he didn't see Stripes.
That's great. Bob, question for Craig?
Craig, I wanted to give a shout out to your high school. I was looking at your early days, and then two of the more famous alumni of Orchard Park High School, yourself and Jim Burt. And Jim Burt up here in the Northeast was such a staple on the Giants defense and loved tremendously. How tight were you guys? And he just seems like such a tough man. He was a tough guy, Craig.
No question about it. Jimmy was fabulous in high school, fabulous in college, and fabulous with the Giants. And let's not forget, we also had another teammate. The three of us played together, Larry Full, who was better known as Lex Luger in pro wrestling later on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
So, I mean, there was the three of us. But Jimmy, the thing about Jimmy was he was just such an intense competitor. We used to lift together, we used to run together, and we used to dream big dreams together. And I love the guy. I'm so glad to see his success. He was a Pro Bowler, and he got some Super Bowl rings and everything like that. And I was gratified because Jimmy was just a great guy and a hard worker, and he really deserved all the good things that came his way.
And Craig, when you arrived in Pittsburgh, a guy like Bradshaw was well established, and we see him on the TV and doing his analysis thing, and he's got that sense of humor and still has that kind of country boy thing. But did he have that humor on the field, or was he all business when it came to game day? He just seems like such a guy that enjoys life.
He enjoys life, and he brought life to that offense, and he was terrific. But there were moments you have to understand. It was tense with Coach Knoll. Coach Knoll was very strong. Chuck Knoll could give you a look that make you want to lose control of your inner body parts. I mean, you could have a wardrobe malfunction as far as body parts goes. I mean, he'd freeze you, man. Yeah, I mean, he'd just look at you, and And that's how you asked Joe Green. Joe Green even said that Chuck was the only guy that ever intimidated him. I mean, that's just the way it was. Coach Knoll was something. So with Terry, Terry, when I got there, it was towards the latter part of his career, and he had already accomplished a lot of great stuff, and he was just a great guy. But what he brought was belief to that offense, because just as you have number 7, Ben Roethlisberger, in the huddle today, and all eyes point towards him, because he's the franchise guy, and no matter how bad things have gotten, this guy's capable of pulling it all together in any point in the game and getting the victory. Well, the same was with Terry. Terry was the magic man. He had 4 Super Bowl rings when I got there, and you looked at him and believed that at any point in time, if things weren't going all that well, he could pull it together and pull our fannies out of the fire. So though he had a lot of humor, he wasn't all that excited with me when I first got there. My first start, we played against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas against Randy White, and it was a preseason game. And on the first pass play, I didn't even touch Randy White, and he spiked Terry into the ground.
Oh,
so Terry lit me up with every adjective he could think of, I'm sure.
And John, Craig, to that point, you were there in '83 for Bradshaw's, one and only game he played that season against the Jets, and he threw a couple of early touchdown passes, and then the elbow sort of went, and that was it. What do you remember about that day and sort of the way things ended for Terry?
Well, there was a number of things going on, but December 15th, 1983, at Shea Stadium against the Jets was Terry Bradshaw's final game. That was the final game at Shea Stadium as well. But it was really kind of funny because all week long the coaches had been telling us, okay, we're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball, and all you guys on the offensive line, nobody touches Terry. Whatever you got to do, you do it. Nobody touches Terry. So we go out there in the first quarter. He just starts throwing the ball everywhere. And he threw 2 scoring passes before that ligament in his elbow finally went. But he was just winging the ball around. And so I'm standing there, and Tunch is standing there, and Tunch says to Terry, he goes, hey, Terry, I thought we were supposed to run the ball. And Terry's in the huddle looking at us all, and he goes, well, you guys know. He says, I ain't no mailman. I'm a gunslinger. And that's the way it was. So I remember in the second quarter playing against the Sack Exchange, and there's Marty Lyons, who I love dearly, but for whatever reason, we just used to have some wicked battles. And Marty and Abdul Salam and Ben Rudolph and all them guys and Joe Klecko. But on the U game, Marty got the best of me. He got into the edge, a crack, and so I'm stuck. I got Marty on my left shoulder, and then around comes Abdul Salam, all 6'4", 6'5", 290, 300, whatever, who's got a free shot at Bradshaw now on a twist stunt. So as he goes by, I do the only thing that I can think of and what the coach has said. If you have to, tackle him. So I tackled him in the most blatant personal foul you can imagine. I jumped on his back and went down to the ground. And it was pitiful. It was so blatant. Holding, personal foul, anything you wanted to call in there, you could have. And we hit the ground about 5 feet in front of Bradshaw with the referee right behind Terry. And I'll never forget, Abdul got up and he started yelling at me. And what can I say? It's the worst, most blatant foul I've ever taken, probably in the history of the NFL. And I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden we both become aware about the same moment that there's no flag. No flag. And I'm cracking up, and Abdul just starts screaming at the official. And I'm sitting there going, oh, how about this? So that's what I remember about that day. It was so funny. And then at the end, the last thing I remember was talking with Marty Lyons when the fans started pouring out of the stands and people started trying to tear their seats out. And somebody came by and tried to grab Marty's chin strap off his helmet. We said, you know what, we're going to leave. Yeah, we're going to leave. We're going to go. Let's get out of here.
Wow.
What story?
And Craig, like I mentioned in your intro, you were voted by the fans to the Steelers All-Century team. What does it mean to you to know how much Steeler fans appreciated your game?
Well, if you remember, that was it was a computer vote. All the fans voted online. It was the first Y2K thing. That's what I think. It was an aberration of Y2K. You remember? that's how it came about. It was just an unbelievable thing, and I could only hold it to that. But the people are wonderful. I love them. The Pittsburgh fans are the most gracious, wonderful, and they are intensely loyal and kind. And you know what I love? People come up and they show me, they whip out a picture and they say, this is my Steeler room, and it's got every kind of Steeler, flag, bed cover, pictures, banners, everything. And then they'll proceed to tell me about an important day in their life that coincided with a big Steelers moment or victory in theirs. So it's been fun. It's fun. It's just fun.
Bob, more for Craig?
Yeah, Craig, and you talked as far as being a Steeler for life, and most of the guys that we talked to, if they went somewhere else later in their career, like you did the 2 years in Minnesota, but just
yes.
had the Steelers and will always be a Steeler. When you left the game after an impressive 12-year career, Craig, in 91, you're still 33 years old. Did you know at the time what you wanted to do possibly in the future? I mean, were you prepared for your post-NFL life at age 33?
No. The funny part about all that is you tried. Both Tunch and I we had a company. It was a sports marketing firm. We were great at putting on events. We were very poor at making a profit. and you know, I mean, it was great conceptually, and we loved it, and we just had a great time with it. But you know, it came to the point you realize, okay, we're just not getting way ahead. So I did what I really wanted to do. That was I opened a gym, and I trained athletes and fighters for about 20 years.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I know. Who goes from playing offensive line for 12 years to boxing? You know.
You're the Mark Gastineau of the offensive line, right there.
What's that?
Mark Gastineau of the offensive side, right?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, who does that? You know, that's really not a smart thing, but that's okay. You know what? I spent 20 years, loved it, trained in the martial arts, met a lot of great people, had a lot of fun, and then after 20 years, I kind of was like Forrest Gump. You know, when Forrest was tired of running, he just stopped running. You know, and he says, I'm tired. And I saw that, and I turned to my wife. I said, honey, you know, that's like me right now. I'm tired of getting punched. I'm tired of getting kicked. I'm tired of getting choked out in the ring and stuff like that. I said, I've lived my life as a human crash test dummy. It's time to sell, baby. Let's settle down. So that's what we did.
And for the most part, Craig, I mean, no one goes to a 12-year career and, stays injury-free. I mean, you're out there, you're banged up. It was a different era. You were out there playing with some crazy stuff. But for the most part, did you avoid major injuries over your career?
I think I got out well. I had, L4 and 5 damage in the low back. I had 3 knee surgeries, and I've still got no ACL and stuff like that. But you know what? I think Lord preserve me, man. I feel great. You know, I mean, if I wasn't so good at eating, I would be even better. You know, but I'm just so good. You know, nobody can hit a buffet like I can. You know, I'm telling you. So
good guy to hang with.
That's right.
Exactly. You know, I tell some of these young offensive linemen, hey, you're getting lean. I'll show you how to eat. All right?
Craig, one more before we let you go. And, over the last 2 weeks, we've seen extreme highs and lows from this year's Steelers team, right? They looked awful against the Eagles, but then great Sunday night against the Chiefs. And, I think this offense now with Le'Veon Bell back is going to be extremely difficult to contend with. But wanted to get your expectations, particularly on the defense, to see, because they've been struggling in pass coverage and getting pressure on the quarterback. But your thoughts, what do you expect from the Steelers the rest of the way?
Well, I don't think it's all too bad to get punched in the nose early in the season, get your attention where it should be. Sometimes, you got to be like the proverbial the 2x4 for the donkey. The 2x4 is there to get his attention first. That's all. And the fact is that's what pretty much happened with Philadelphia. I think there are elements here that are really looking good. You look at the 2-3 technique tackles when they go sub-package football, and Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt, and boy, they just really did a great job last weekend getting upfield and pushing and driving the line back and creating a well that Alex Smith had to throw at him. You look at the linebackers. LT is terrific, and Ryan Shazier is about as big play hungry as you can get. Now, he's got injury issues. That's been problematic. The outside guys, Jarvis Jones, he's banged up now. Justin Gilbert got himself banged up a little bit. You got the Anthony Chickillo, who's promising outside young linebacker, got banged up a little. So who do you turn to but the old great pro, James Harrison, Debo, 38 years old and still getting it done. The day after they played Sunday night, down on the south side, and we're going to do our showdown there, Tunch and I. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and James Harrison is already there doing leg presses with 1,100 pounds. I mean, come on, you got to be kidding me. You know, I mean, this is a guy, he takes care of himself, and he works hard. He works incredibly hard. And you know what? I think they're going to have to let him go out there and do what that 38-year-old body can do, because he's still strong enough and he's still got game enough. He can get out there and get after. What's going to happen is you got to find out really where the corners are going to be at. The corners are going to tell a lot what Artie Burns can do, if Senquez Golson can get back at all. You've got some good safeties with Mike Mitchell, but Robert Golden was hurt. He was out with a hammy last week, and so they were down to Jordan Dangerfield. Yes, I say Jordan, not Rodney, but Jordan Dangerfield, and he did a great job. So, we'll see. That defense is better than people think, and I do believe that if they can consistently get out there and get the job done, which everybody hopes that, every team hopes that they can be consistent and get it done. But the biggest problem has been the injury bug has really kind of bitten this team a little bit right now.
Craig, let our listeners know, how can they follow you, whether it's online or over social media?
I'm not real big on social media. If you go to CraigWolfley.com, Punch and I do a pregame meal podcast. We'll be putting that out tomorrow. And what we do is we give it a pretty in-depth scouting report of the upcoming game that the Steelers are about to play. And you can pick that up there. And I hope you enjoy it and like it. We have a good time, me and my bud. And we'll probably, snackerate around that. Not like grabbing some grub while you're doing a little bit of football talk,
Oh, no.
Indeed. Craig, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to be a part of the show. You are fantastic. We hope you'll come back and do it again sometime, share more of your thoughts and insights with us, because we had a lot of fun.
Oh, I had a lot of fun. It was great talking with you guys. Looking forward to it. And I was interested because you were talking so much about Curley Culp when I first got on there, and I could hear it, and I was like, oh, man, I remember trying to block that dude. That was not fun. Oh, he was a monster,
I can't imagine it would have been. Yeah.
No,
wrong guy.
No, he was a monster. He was something. So you get some great guests and some great people, so thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Craig. All the best to you and your family, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night,
right,
Craig.
take care, Craig. That is former Steelers and Vikings guard Craig Wolfley. And boy, Bob, I'm sure that's just the surface of the great stories that Craig could tell.
Yeah, for all the stories that Curley didn't want to tell, he's more of a Craig is more of a storyteller, and boy, he what a great attitude and such an underrated player, Chris. A great run in Pittsburgh, and of course, having played with the monster guys and famous people that he did. A guy like him would always go under the radar screen, but he was in the trenches, and all those years was an incredible lineman, and we want to definitely point that out to our listeners. But always a pleasure to speak with an ex-Steeler, and especially a guy with that type of personality.
Exactly. All right, when Bob and I come back, we'll be turning on the Thursday Night Tailgate Spotlight on the Positive. Then we'll wrap up the show, and we're going to do that on the other side of these words from our good friends over at Coastal Orthopedics and Kyvan Foods.
Are you suffering from chronic pain in your shoulders, hips, knees, or wrists? Tired of living life with an old injury that just won't go away? If you answered yes to either of these questions, we can help. At Coastal Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Dr. Candelora and his fine staff of medical professionals will get you back on the road to recovery. Their state-of-the-art facility and attention to detail will ensure you will be enjoying life again and feeling invincible in no time. Since 1991, Dr. Candelora and Coastal Orthopedics have been specializing in joint replacement, arthritis, and osteoporosis care, as well as pediatric and adult general orthopedics. Visit us on the web, www.bone-dr.com, or call our Newport Richey office just north of Tampa at 727-848-1417. Proud sponsors of Mike Ditka's The Gridiron Greats Assistance Fund.
This is Reggie Kelly, former Cincinnati Bengals and Atlanta Falcon tight end, and I'm the owner of Kyvan Foods. And if you enjoy delicious food, you're going to love my Kyvan products, which consist of our honey apple salsa, sweet barbecue sauce, and an array of seasonings. For store locations, online orders, and recipes, check out our website at www.kyvan82.com. That's Kyvan 82.com. One taste, and you'll appreciate the goodness.
Hey, welcome back. This is Todd Washington, two-time Super Bowl champ, offensive line coach for the Baltimore Ravens, and you are listening to Thursday Night Tailgate with my boys Chris-Mascaro and Bob-Lazzari on the Armed Forces Radio Network. Go get them, guys.
Hey, and we're back here on Thursday Night Tailgating. Bob, before we get to our spotlight on the positive, let's quickly run down the rest of our five-star picks of the week. And a moment ago, prior to Craig coming on the show, you had the Vikings beating the Texans, and so did I. Our second game this week is the 1-3 Jets going to my 3-1 Steelers. The Steelers are a 7.5-point favorite. The over/under is 48.5. Bob, can my Steelers keep it going here?
Oh, they righted the ship last week, Chris, and I just can't picture the Jets going into Pittsburgh. Jets don't score enough points. Pittsburgh's rolling. Pittsburgh's home, and the Jets are going to fall to 1-4, and we're going to start hearing rumblings up here in the Northeast. But yeah, they're going to go into Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to win a game, probably like 31-20.
Okay. And it's close because I have almost the exact same score. But Bob, they're going to be they'll be putting the Bumblebee uniforms on, so we get to look forward to that this weekend.
Oh, wow!
The Steelers bring that back out, but I think what a difference we saw Le'Veon Bell make, right? Coming back for the Steelers from his suspension, 144 yards. Rushing last week against the Chiefs, added 5 catches for 34 yards. Sammy Coates is starting to come into his own a little bit as a second option for Bennett, wide receiver. He had his third reception so far this season of over 40 yards. And the Steelers defense, started to play a bit better. No sacks really for the first 3 games. They got credited for one, and when one of the quarterbacks was scrambling and got tackled at the line of scrimmage. But they had 4 last week, 3 by Cam Hayward. So I think they're looking a lot better. And Bob, Ryan Fitzpatrick, 4 touchdowns, 10 interceptions on the season so far, 9 interceptions. And the last 2 games, they're dead last in the giveaway takeaway, right, -11. So, Matt Forte's got a little bit of a rib injury as well. So I think my boys get it done too. I have it 34-20, so very close to what you have.
Okay.
Let's quickly go through our third game. The 3-1 Falcons going to the 4-0 Broncos, Bob. The Broncos are a 5.5-point home favorite. The over/under is 47. What do you think? Do the Broncos stay undefeated, Bob?
Broncos, Chris, we thought they might have a hangover from last year after what they did, but my goodness, their defense is still playing at a very, very high level. And again, it's ironic because Atlanta has put up more points than anyone. So you're going to have a great battle here. I just find it more difficult for a team like Atlanta to go out in the mile-high air. A dome team going out there, Chris, and I just think Denver's still got too much. And I think might see some points. Well, it may negate everything. Well, let's call it a 24-20 game Denver.
All right. So, Bob, it's going to be interesting to see, right? The Broncos starting quarterback, Trevor Siemian, the injury, to his left non-throwing shoulder this past weekend. So, Paxton Lynch had to come in, but continued to lead them, right? They win 27-7 over the Bucs last week. So, so he's looked, for, again, small sample size, but looked pretty good, So, but, to your point, Bob, about the Falcons offense, put up nearly 600 yards against the Carolina Panthers last week, Bob. Hard for me to believe that, the Panthers have sort of fallen as far as it seems like they've fallen. But, my philosophy always is, Bob, that defense wins championships and offenses with great wide receivers don't. So we saw evidence of, we see that now even in the new NFL, right? Where quarterbacks and wide receivers are king, right? Broncos won a Super Bowl last year largely based on their defense, and they have that same defense, coming back again, this year. So I'm with you, Bob. I just don't see the Falcons pulling off an upset in Mile High, especially, when their defense is ranked 31st against the pass. So I'm going to take the Broncos as well, and I've got them scoring some points. I like them 30-20. Our next game, we've got the 2-2 Bengals going to the 3-1 Cowboys, something we talked about at the top of the show, Bob. The Bengals are actually a 1-point road favorite, which surprised me. Over under 45.5. So, Bob, what do you think? Can the Bengals put a damper on the Cowboys' love affair with Dak Prescott?
The Bengals have been kind of, iffy so far, Chris, and I think we all think that they might be a better team than what they've shown, and this might be the week that Prescott does make a mistake or two, and a team like Cincinnati is just good enough to capitalize on it. It is a very even game. I think Cincinnati goes in there and actually will win on the road. It's going to be a close game. I'm going to pick Cincinnati, goes in there How about 30-24 Cincy?
All right. So, it's interesting as I start looking, up and down, right? We talked about Dak Prescott and, how well he's playing, right? We talk about, Ezekiel Elliott and how well he's playing. The Cowboys defense holding teams to 95 yards rushing, and they're 10th in points allowed, only giving up 19.3 a game. They're a +3 in the giveaway takeaway category. But, they're going to have to face Andy Dalton, who's, off to a hot start, 3rd in passing yards. And his favorite target, A.J. Green, is right with him, right? 3rd in receiving yards. Not surprising, right? So I think you're right, Bob. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a very tight game. But I think the advantage swings to Cincinnati with the more experienced quarterback. So I, too, am going to take the Bengals to eke out a win. I've got a little bit closer, a little bit lower scoring, 24-20. And our last game, Bob, the 2-2 Giants going to the 2-1 Packers, who are coming off a bye. The Packers are a 7.5-point home favorite. The over/under is 48. Who do you like here, Bob?
Giants are killing me this year, Chris. They really are. Last week they did, and the talent is there, and it's obvious to me. And some of his biggest fans are calling Odell Beckham a humongous head case right now, and it's so sad, Chris, because we know what kind of hands and talent this guy possesses, and it seems like he's not on the same page with the quarterback. Little dissension there, Chris, under McAdoo, it seems anyway. I don't know how they can just turn that all off going up against a possible Super Bowl-type quality team like Green Bay. Green Bay really, and Green Bay's, had the bye already, Chris. They're coming off well-rested. Aaron Rodgers against the defense that we've called slightly suspect. I don't see the Giants going in there. I've been pretty high on the Giants up until now. I'm going to get off that bandwagon because of what they've done to my picks. So we're going Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers to come back in all his glory. 31-20 Green Bay.
All right. And, Bob, one of the things I was surprised to learn as I was looking, kind of looking into some of the stats around this game, Aaron Rodgers currently 27th in completion percentage, 58.5, which is the lowest of his career. He's 12th in passer rating so far, and his yards per attempt is 6.56, which is 25th in the league, and also his lowest total in that category as well over the course of his career. So the Packers' passing game has essentially become Aaron Rodgers to Jordy Nelson's show. No one else doing much of anything. Nelson has accounted for a third of Rodgers' passing yards so far this season. On the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, though, Bob, the Packers' defense, number one against the rush, only giving up 43 yards per game, but that might be deceiving because they're 29th against the pass, giving up 307, so why run when you can pass? So we'll see what Eli does to take advantage of that. And to your point, Odell Beckham, who knows where that guy's head is right now. So, I'm with you, Bob. I like the Packers in this game as well. I think it's going to be a little bit of a shootout since the Packers defense, against the pass not so good. I like them to win it, though, 30-27. So those are our 5-star picks of the week. Bob, it's now time for us to turn on our Thursday Night Tailgate spotlight on the positive. So who do you have for us this week?
Well, speaking of the Packers, Chris, I was watching this week, last week, actually watching the Saints game, and you remember their great fullback John Kuhn, who is a cult hero, who's now playing with the Saints, and I was saying to myself, I remember he was doing some great things I've heard of in the past off the field, and I looked more into it. And I was wondering, his move to New Orleans, if that would affect it. And he used to, and his wife, Lindsay, used to be very involved with the Touchdowns for Hope, which is an organization. They put on a dinner every year, Chris, and it's a nonprofit that basically provides shelter and various services to pregnant, homeless, parenting mothers that are pretty young, between the ages of 18 and 24. Now, Kuhn, being in New Orleans, couldn't do it. So who steps up? Mike Daniels, the defensive tackle of the team. And ironically, Mike's wife is named Heaven, and it's a well-named because these two people are very, very involved in this. So they gladly accepted to be the hosts, to step in for John Kuhn and his wife and take over this. And the more you look at what the Daniels, the couple, has done They work very close with the March of Dimes. Heaven's nephew, Chris, was less than a pound at birth, so they became very involved with the March of Dimes, was in the neonatal intensive care unit of a hospital for a long time. So that got her involved in charitable causes. She's also done a lot. Both of them do a lot for the cancer cause, and it's just an amazing story. She was one of 6 kids of a single mom, and that's where she got a lot of her shall we say, charitable ways. But Mike Daniels and his wife Heaven. If you go to the Packer website or PackerNews.com, you could Google Mike, Heaven, Daniels, whatever charities, and you'll see just a few of the things they do. But this Touchdowns for Hope and them stepping in for the Coons was a great story.
Yes, it is, very much. And Bob, tonight I want to put the spotlight on LaShawn McCoy of the Bills and his Shades of Greatness Foundation. You know, multiple times a year, LaShawn reaches out to the Pennsylvania community to bring them together, enrich the community, and to give back, and with a focus on socioeconomically disadvantaged children and their families. And he hosts, charity cookouts. He holds job and community resource fairs, softball and basketball games, turkey drives, school supply drives, holiday season gift giving, and direct support to individuals and families that are battling ALS. Right? His grandmother, unfortunately, lost her battle with that terrible disease, and battling that disease became a driving force behind LaShawn creating his foundation. And the foundation provides direct support to individuals that are battling ALS, to ensure that they have a comfortable quality of life, and supporting their families and their caregivers, to help that are they're giving the quality of life to the people, to the patients and those that are suffering from ALS. So, and additionally, the foundation provides support to organizations that are also working to find cures, treatment for the people that are living with the disease. And the events are held, not only he holds are not just for the people. It's to celebrate his grandmother's life and have a legacy for his grandmother. So they're raising money to support organizations for the research and for these socioeconomically disadvantaged children and their families. So kudos to LaShawn McCoy, who's making a difference in the lives of those battling ALS, just like our good friend Kevin Turner, Bob, who we miss so very much.
Yeah, and McCoy, from everything I've read and heard about him, no one has anything bad to say about the guy. Very charitable guy, and from a very, very strict background.
Yeah. So again, kudos to LaShawn McCoy and to Mike Daniels and his wife Heaven, and obviously to John Kuhn as well. So these are the types of stories, folks, that you're going to hear us do on this segment every single week, letting you know about the great things that current and former players are doing out there to make a positive impact on people's lives around the world. And we hear it around the world, right? From our good friend Nick Lowery at the top of the show. So, folks, 99% of the guys in the NFL, and in college too, for that matter, because we've talked to Prairie View A&M head coach Willie Simmons, and he's talked about his players doing great things in their community outside of Houston. But there are great people doing great things, all across the NFL. So please, you hear about the horrible stories, and that's the probably 1%, or probably even less than that if we really did the math, that are getting arrested or doing this, that, and the other thing, right? It's the 99% plus of the guys that are doing great things. So tune in here every single week here on Thursday Night Tailgate, our spotlight on the positive, to hear more of the stories about guys doing great things out in their communities. All right, Bob, it is time for us to put a bow on this episode. Our thanks again to Nick Lowery, Ed White, Curley Culp, and Craig Wolfley for joining us tonight. And, Bob, as I say every single week, one of the great things is to get to share my Thursday nights with you, my friend.
Well, hey, we do it on Tuesdays, we do it on Thursdays, and we always have a blast. But the Thursday night show, to end it like we do, Chris, I always look forward to working with you. And we just love what we do, and we'll keep doing it. It's great stuff, and another great lineup tonight. And thanks for setting that up. It was just tremendous talking to those guys.
All right, next week, who do we have scheduled to join us? Well, John Luke. We heard us talk about John last week. He's a feature auctioneer for A&M Storage Wars, and he'll be with us. He was scheduled to join us tonight, but he got sick and asked if we could reschedule him to next week. So we look forward to having John Luke as part of the show. He's a big follower of ours, and we appreciate that very much. Born and raised in North Harlem, New York. So we'll talk a lot of Jets and Giants with John when he joins us next week. Former Vikings running back Darren Nelson will be back with us, as will our good friend and ESPN radio host Christine Lisi. Plus, we'll finally get to induct former Saints and 49ers defensive back Toy Cook into our guest Hall of Fame. Toy wasn't able to join us a few weeks ago when we had our 5th anniversary special, so we look forward to having Toy and honoring him next week. And, of course, Patriots running back Tony Collins will be back with us. We'll do our 5-star picks of the week. So a really fun night scheduled for you next week. We hope you'll come back and share it with Bob and I. Want to remind you, how can you follow us on social media? Well, we both have Facebook pages, Bob-Lazzari, Chris-Mascaro. Please take a look at us on Facebook. Thursday Night Tailgate show page as well. So if you've got some comments or questions or things you want us to ask on your behalf to some of our guests, please go to our Thursday Night Tailgate page and let us know. We'd be glad to do it for you. Give us a like. That's important to us as well. Plus, you can find us on Twitter. I am at CT-Mascaro. Bob is at Bob_Lazzari, and the show is at TNT Podcast. Plus, you can stream or download any of our archive episodes for free, folks, on great podcasting sites like our good friends over at Podbean, who had been recommending the show on their banner ads for us for quite some time, and particularly on their mobile app over the last several weeks. We can't thank them enough for doing that. You can also stream the show on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker, Stitcher, Audio Boom, Player.fm, SoundCloud. We're all over the net. And if you happen to have an app that you're particularly fond of and we're not on there, let us know. We'll make sure we get on there for you. Plus, you can check out our website as well, thursday-night-tailgate.com. So please let us know what you think of the show, and we can't thank you enough for being a part of it. Bob, take us home, my friend.
All right, Chris, and an FYI, I've taken 2 Tums so far watching the Red Sox in the background here. So
no doubt you have.
I won't get down to the end of the bottle, but by the end of the series, who knows, right? Our thanks to our announcer, Joe LaGanusa, for the great job he does with our weekly intro and ads, and to James Brocato and all the guys from Painted Faces for our upcoming outro music. On behalf of myself and Chris, we thank everyone tonight for listening. We appreciate you the most. Until next week, everyone. Good night, Kevin. We miss you.